Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Brianna McWilliam. I'm an author, educator, Reiki practitioner, and creative arts therapist, and I've been in the field for about 13 years now. And I'm hopping on here because if you don't know me, I like to make a lot of videos. And someone recently was trash talking me because they said that I made a video about personal responsibility and how you need to be responsible for managing your own emotions and your feelings in a relationship, because otherwise you become enmeshed and that leads to ambivalence, right? Because if you become enmeshed, then closeness and intimacy becomes a threat. Okay. Now, someone said that it was a dismissive excuse for not behaving well to say that you need to be responsible for your own feelings. Okay. There is so much to unpack in that statement. But I thought I would really just start with the role of vulnerability in relationships, because when we start qualifying our partners as behaving well or not behaving well based on how we are reacting to them, instead of approaching the situation from a place of self-sovereignty and responsibility, we're not actually interested in owning our own authority. Okay. We're also not really capable of being fully authentic or vulnerable in a relationship, even if what you think you are doing is somehow efforting hard to make it work. Okay. You are contributing your fair share. You're keeping that scorecard above the relationship balanced. But really, you are perpetuating the problem, because you're essentially striving for acceptance by being unaccepting. Okay. So the idea that I'm fine no matter what is different than I'm accepted or unaccepted. Okay. So oftentimes we think, if I'm not accepted, I'm not fine. There's something wrong with me. And that is just the social nature of our brains and our biology. It's also a way of thinking that has been kind of beaten into us from childhood. And we've also been taught that we have good and bad feelings. And bad feelings are scary and they're destructive and they're harmful. Okay. And they shouldn't be entertained because they make other people who've also been taught that bad feelings are scary and should not be entertained uncomfortable. Okay. So we fear that expressing a need will make us seem too needy and it will scare someone off and we won't be accepted and we won't be fine. More bad feelings. All right. And so extricating yourself from a cycle of need suppression to avoid bad feelings will only make you feel bad anyway. It requires some understanding that you have to shift from need suppression to a greater sense of self-efficacy. This doesn't mean anti-dependency. Having a sense of self-efficacy doesn't mean that you can't rely on people for anything. That's an extreme interpretation of that. That's not what it means. Okay. It's a sense of self-sovereignty. And it actually takes a sense of self-efficacy and self-sovereignty to be interdependent with someone in a relationship or in any other context, family, friends, colleagues, so forth and so on. Okay. And we have this notion in our heads that if I'm not in a relationship, I'm alone, which is clearly not true. It's just this narrative that you tell yourself. Okay. It also requires, on some level, an understanding that you will be fine and you are worthy and you are of value no matter what someone else says, does, thinks, and or accepts about you. And if they don't accept you, you don't want to be with that person anyway. All right. And so understanding that you will be fine no matter what requires a broadening of your perspective and facing your fear of bad feelings kind of head on. You have to allow yourself to feel the bad feelings so that bad feelings don't scare you anymore. There's going to be a lot of finger quotes in this video, just a heads up. Okay. You got to let them move through you so that you can truly be vulnerable. Not that you cut them off or you deny them or that you label them as bad or unacceptable and or you search for a quick fix and or solution or some kind of short-term escape or an addictive substance and or yet another rebound relationship to avoid the bad feelings that come up, okay? On the other hand, wallowing in them because you feel some sense of empowerment through your martyrdom, through your victimhood, is actually affecting the same thing, okay? So feeling the bad feelings with intention means to love and examine them for the roadsides that they are, and allowing yourself to really accept and surrender to the knowledge that the universe and your own higher knowing has a broader perspective than you. But even if you don't accept that, okay, even if you think that there is no higher power, there is no existential being, there's no such thing as the esoteric, even if you don't believe that, there is an essential premise here that will help clean up your thinking, okay? So for 1 year, I'm going to put a challenge to you. For 1 year, I recommend that you choose to accept this premise, that everything that happens to you is exactly the best thing that could be happening to you at any given time and point, that you are exactly and precisely where you need to be and should be at any given moment in time. And so if you accept that as a basic premise, then what you have to do is you have to think about what else would have to be true in order for that to be the case. What else would have to be true in order for that to be the case? And whatever you come up with, that is the direction in which you want to focus. That is the direction in which you want your thoughts to snowball. That is the premise upon which you will be able to receive your next inspired action steps. Okay, whether you believe it or not that there's some kind of omnipotent and benevolent force and or sense of oneness in the universe, if you simply decide in an existential world that the basic premise upon which you will construct your reality is that you are precisely where you need to be at any given moment, then you cannot help but achieve a sense of happiness and consciousness with your situation. It starts to raise your vibe. And that is what will allow you to have what I call a moon's eye view of your life. In our lives, we are, by the very nature of our human bodies and the constrictions of time and space reality, both limited and blessed, to live only moment to moment, relying on our memories and our wrinkles to create this illusion of a linear trajectory. But at any given moment, you can simply draw a line in the sand and start a new story. Many of us don't, but that doesn't mean we can't. And that is what it really means to have free will. And this is what it means to be truly self-empowered and self-sovereign. Incidentally, this is also what it means to be truly present and show up as your fullest and most authentic self in a relationship, to be vulnerable, okay? So how might you revise a disappointing story using a moon's eye view so that it ends up being in service of your highest good and proves this essential premise? Okay, well, I've given a couple examples before. I will give a few again. The first example I'm going to give you is the red bike. And for those of you that have heard the red bike example before, I hope you'll go with me on this journey once again. Let's say you have a desire for something and it's a shiny red car. You want a new red car, maybe it's a convertible, something like that. And you want to lose 15 pounds before your high school reunion. So you make a manifesting intention. If it is for my greatest good and the greatest good of all, I would like to manifest a shiny red car and lose 15 pounds before my high school reunion. Okay. Now, let's say a week later, your cousin shows up at your door and they have a shiny red bike for you. Bought it for your nephew, doesn't fit him, can't find the receipt, can't return it. Would you like it? Now, you take one look at the bike and you're like, no, I don't need a bike. Not for one moment thinking that this may actually be the deliverance of the essence of what it is that you are asking for. Because you look at it and you think, that's not a red bike, or that's not a red car, that's a red bike. And you make no association to any other aspect of what it is that you are asking for. And yet, what if you got a red car and now instead of getting to work on time as it was originally intended to facilitate, you're now stuck in traffic every morning and you're running late to work. Now you have to stay late every night, working overtime, not only to make up for the fact that you're late, but also to pay for the additional insurance you have to pay for the gas prices, which are going up. And now you're gaining weight because you're driving to work and you're not walking that extra half mile to public transit. Okay. Now the red bike, there's no traffic in the bike lane. So now you are getting to work on time. Maybe your boss is even impressed with your punctuality, and now you've got a raise on top of that. Additionally, a bike doesn't cause any kind of pollution, so it is in the greatest good of all, and you're losing weight at a rapid rate because you're burning calories at twice the rate you normally do. So it doesn't look like a red car and, that diet pill that you wanted that you saw on Amazon, but it's actually the answer to the thing that you were asking for. And the universe had yielded to you the essence of what it is that you truly wanted and or needed. But only if you can see and perceive it that way. Only if you can step into that moon's eye view and accept the premise that all things that come to you are for the greatest good and a mirrored reflection of where you're at. Okay, I'll give you a more personal example. I've been talking about this the past couple of videos that I've made. I'm moving this month, and I've had a chance to look at a lot of places. I had 3 applications fall through, and I was really down in the dumps. I was really disappointed by this one place. It was shiny, brand new, the essence of everything I wanted, lots of finishes. I couldn't believe that I could afford that apartment, and it turns out I couldn't. They had mislisted the price. It was double what I could actually afford. And so I was really upset about that. But my existing landlord reaches out and says to me, hey, you know what? I have a place. It's 2-bedroom. It was within my price range. It was on the same block. It was the same structure. I wanted a duplex with 2 bedrooms. This actually has laundry and an added backyard. Incidentally, this is all on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. So you can imagine it's quite a find. But it didn't have the finishes. So I was disappointed because it didn't have the finishes. I had to really give myself a good cry over that. Okay. And then I thought to myself, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong with my manifesting mojo? And then I had to do the reframe and say to myself, I have no idea what this is going to lead to. I have no idea. And for me to accept that premise that whatever happens is actually in my greatest good, I have to understand and know that whatever is coming for me is bigger than anything I could have imagined. And that this place is going to put me in a position to receive much more of what I have put into my vision of abundance for the future than anything that some extra finishes could provide, right? So for example, what are some of my deepest heart's desires? One of my deepest heart's desires is to find profitable partnerships in business. So how do I not know that I move into this building and somehow end up living next to someone who has a great idea and somehow we have a powwow and make a shit ton of money, right? How do I not know that one day on my walk home from work, now that I live on the other end of the block, I turn right instead of left and I run smack into my next long-term partner, right? So part of it is being able to assume that moon's eye view and to accept that if that is an essential premise, starting to rewrite the narratives around everything that happens to you so that you are always in a high vibe place. And then the universe will yield more high vibe things to you. Now, it's hard for us to do that in the context of relationships because there is a sense of immediacy to it. There are concrete things and conditions that really get tied up in it, okay? We create things like marriage certificates and certain kinds of laws around visiting rights and ownership and other kinds of institutions around the ways in which we interact with each other physically, emotionally, psychically, spiritually, and spatially, right? And so for those of us that are so deeply tied to these conditions, either through years of conditioning, tradition, cultural values, or other societal norms, we come to view these things like relationships or marriage as foundational for how we function in the world, for how we actually move through the world. It becomes a barometer for happiness. It becomes the structure through which we actually experience ourselves and a sense of basic security. And if it, over time, this can start to persuade our subconscious selves to believe that certain things about what is right to believe certain things about what is right and what is wrong in the world. And it can also sometimes make us inflexible to change. or even to evolution. Okay. Sometimes we fear our own evolution or the evolution of our partners because when those things occur, we feel the foundations of the house start to shake. Okay. And so we suppress certain aspects of ourselves because we're so afraid that the roof is going to cave in if we do. And we fear the roof caving in because, as I said before, we only live moment to moment and we don't see that glorious mansion that's going to be erected in its place. Okay. And so vulnerability is experiencing some level of contrast within you and knowing that if you express that contrast or that need, whatever is pressing for expression, whether or not it is accepted, it's okay. That's why vulnerability is actually a mark of strength and not a mark of weakness. That's why it's not about giving in order to get. That's why it's not about expressing a need only when you think it will be met. Okay? Vulnerability is about self-advocacy. Vulnerability is a willingness to feel uncomfortable feelings, knowing that you will not be destroyed by them. And not only that, but being able to, or being wanting and willing to experience them for the wisdom that they provide in the contrast, right? Because when you're feeling vulnerable, there's some aspect of your inner being that is creating a level of tension and pressure within you. It wants to be seen and to be acknowledged and expressed. But sometimes you make the choice not to allow for that expression because you feel that somehow without the external satisfaction of that, it's pointless. Or maybe it would even work against you, pushing away the people you love because they think you're too needy or they think you're too intense, okay? But truly in a moment of I'm going to say, honorability and vulnerability, what's really being asked of you is that you advocate for yourself first. And sometimes it's the only the vocalization that this kind of internal charge really wants and even requires, which is to say that sometimes all you got to do is say it out loud and suddenly it doesn't matter so much anymore. Now, on the other hand, maybe you do say it out loud and it does still matter and you don't get what you want. Well, now you have new information. You have new information that was really essential for you to have if you are to continue on the path of expansion and of ascension. So if you're ready to receive in the concrete world of form that which your heart truly desires, that information and the ensuing conflict, contrast, or bad feelings are actually going to help you establish that moon's eye view a lot more easily and a lot more quickly the next time around. Okay. Now, many of us don't like to feel vulnerable because we associate it with weakness, or because to truly be vulnerable, you have to have some kind of loosening of the need for a specific outcome. Okay. Now, the only way that you can really release the need for control, right, to affect and control the outcome, is to know that whatever happens, you're not going to disintegrate. And the hardest thing to do is really to be still with instability, or okay with ambiguity, and patient with ambivalence. Okay. So let the bad feelings come, because the bad feelings will put you in touch with your humanity. They will remind you of your sweetness and your compassion and empathy. They also will remind you of your power and your own authority and your strength. And they will remind you too of the brevity and the preciousness of life. And yet, as you allow them to really move through you, paradoxically, you're also reminded of just how unbreakable you truly are, how resilient you truly are. And to be genuinely and authentically vulnerable is not to be willing to pour yourself into somebody else or all over somebody else, but rather to be willing and brave enough to be wholly you, regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether or not it is accepted or unaccepted to someone else. In this sense, vulnerability is actually the greatest expression of self-possession, because vulnerability is the epitome of self-acceptance. And when you have two self-accepting people in a relationship together, vulnerability becomes a lot safer, a lot more easeful, a lot more pleasurable, enlivening, passionate, and exciting. Okay. Now, if anything that I have said resonates with you, I do invite you to check out my online course, Healing Attachment Wounds with Mindfulness and Creative Arts Therapies. I'm actually, for the next couple of days, running a flash sale on it. Normally I charge about $1,650 and I'm only charging $197. So if you're interested in checking it out, I invite you to take a look at the caption of this video. And also, if anything that I've said resonates with you, if anything about your vulnerability has come up for you, I invite you to leave a comment in the feed below this video. Because when you tell me more about how you're experiencing things, and when you tell me more about the questions that are raised for you, that allows me to create more content like this. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will catch you in the next one.